Okay, so now that we have that done, we have most of it done, and we're on to the final topic I'd like to talk about, which is how to make our depth of our camera work a little bit better. As of right now, it's just using the distance between the two furthest players, and either using that or a maximum of 1 to determine where the camera should be, which, you know, that may work for you, and if it does, then that's great. But I think it can be improved, and I think it can be a little bit smoother and a little smarter. I'll get a tag out for our camera here, and the other reason I'm doing this is so that we can watch the location of the camera. So we can see right now that the camera takes the distance into account, but it's pretty jittery based on the distance, because the distance is kind of constantly changing, and so the camera has a lot of like really fast zoom in and out motions, which is a little jerky and a little nauseating, to be honest. So I'd like to change that. I'd also like to be able to create some sort of bounds for the depth, right? Say we only want to zoom in a certain amount or be able to zoom out a certain amount. So I'm going to start by getting rid of this, and this is sort of the right direction in which we want to head, so luckily there's not too much we have to change here. What I want to do is, we currently have the bounds of the actual stage area defined by this. What I want to do is then create an actual bounding box for the players themselves. So if these are the total bounds for the stage area, the bounding box would be from the furthest player to the other furthest edge. So it would actually be much smaller than this. It would be around here. And so what we're essentially going to be doing here is we're going to be creating a lerp percentage that we can use to apply lerping onto the depth of our camera. For those of you unfamiliar with the term lerp, it's short for linear interpolation. And if you've ever used keyframe blending, this would be linear interpolation here, right? So I'm not going to go too crazy in depth about it, but basically what I want to do is calculate a lerp percentage from 0 to the actual bounding box based on our player's bounding box. So it's going to be exactly pretty much what we have here, just a couple of extra little tweaks. First of all, I'm going to divide it by 2, and the reason for that is because we want half bounds, just how we have half bounds over here. I also don't care about the Z differences in the players for the X and Y bounding box for the players, so I'll ignore those as well. I'll then get a splitter out, which gives us the X, Y, and Z coordinates. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to add the X and Y values together to give us the added X and Y half bounds. So to calculate that against our bounds, I'll go ahead and get the X half bound and the Y half bound, and I'll add them together. So those are being added together. And now what we're going to do is we'll take the player bounds and divide it by the X and Y half bounds. So when we take the player's half bounds and divide them by the actual play area bounds, half bounds, we get a percentage, and this is what I would consider our lerp percentage. So I'm going to get a variable out, and I'll call this lerp percentage, and this is going to go into the number as lerp percentage, and I'm going to set this to continuously update when powered. Just so our camera doesn't stand out here, I'm going to paint that white. Alright, so as the players get further apart, the lerp percentage will get higher, up to 1. As they get closer together, the lerp percentage will get smaller, closer to 0. So what we essentially just did was an inverse lerp, which gave us a percentage. We can now use this percentage to lerp against minimum and maximum depth values to calculate our z position. So now we can actually have differences of depths. So let's go ahead and make some. I'll label this max depth, and I'll label this one min depth. If we take the maximum depth and subtract it from the minimum depth, then we take our lerp percentage and multiply it against this value. This is our lerp percentage. Then we add the maximum depth to this value that we're getting. We can output this straight into our z position. So we'll see that it goes somewhere between 5 and 10 based on how far apart or close together the things are. So now that we're in play mode, you can see that it's a lot smoother in its jerkiness in terms of zooming in and out. It still zooms in and out, but it's less jerky, and it has a bounds of a minimum and maximum in terms of its depth. So I'll label this calculate depth. And so now if we want to be able to change these values, we can. So what I'm going to do is I will actually use variable modifiers here instead. So now we can use these. So I'll get max depth, and this one will be min depth, and both of these will get. And now we can move these up into this other chip. We don't need to worry about moving the lerp percentage because we're not actually doing that. It's calculating it for us. This could also just be passed in. So if we didn't want to use a variable, we could just do this, which is probably better. I was just doing it so we could see the difference here. I'll go ahead and plug that in. And so now if we want to change the min and max zooms, we can. And now remember, these are inverse. The min is higher because the minimum depth is actually further this way, right? And so now we can move these closer and further apart. So now we can see we can easily play with the zoom values based on distance for, you know, whatever works for the game that you're trying to make. So as they're further apart, the zoom backs up to close to 15, and as they get closer together, it will go all the way up to whatever the max zoom we've set, which I think is currently at 3. Just to help further show this depth thing here, I'm going to get a tag out, and I'm going to place it here at the origin. I'll just give this a label O. And so I'll have this, the player, every 5 seconds stop the random movement and go to the O tag for 5 seconds and then switch back and forth. So now we can see how this looks. So they're moving around randomly, and after about 5 seconds they should all go here, and we can see that we zoom in to the maximum zoom in, and then they all disperse and we zoom out accordingly. So what I'll actually do is I'll take this tag and I'll put it on this object here, which means that if this object were to move, so does this tag, right? We can see how this looks. The players, we zoomed out pretty far because the players are pretty far apart. Then we can zoom in, and then about 5 seconds in, and the stage decides to move over to the right. And so we can see when these things all move in, we still zoom in, and this is now our staged area here, over further to the right. So here we have a working Smash Bros. Style camera. I know that some parts of this video were a little bit more challenging or technically complex, which is why I tried to include a incremental level of difficulty as the video went on, so that if maybe towards the end of the video things got a little too confusing, you would at least have another way of doing it. Right? The first thing I showed about how to calculate depth between the players I think works great. Personally, I like the latter better because it feels a little smoother. So hopefully this video was helpful, not just to those who stuck around to the end, but to anybody. Hopefully there was at least a little bit of interesting or useful tidbits in here, like how to calculate averages between points and things like that. So if you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. If you're new around here and you'd like to see more Dreams tutorials, click subscribe. I have new tutorial videos coming out all the time, at least once a week. If you have any questions about anything or you just want to say hello, go ahead and leave a comment down below. I'd be happy to talk with anybody who wants to. I hope everyone's doing really well and staying super safe. I'll see you in the next video.